Steve Watt told us that we were the only bowling team in the world that could win the match from the point that we were in, and we did what he asked us to do. That's my best match ever.
You
And
bowled
so that's why that
76
photo
overs
is here.
there.
76?
Yes, you did.
What a muppet! What are you doing letting somebody... Oh my God.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Random Cricket Photos that make my guests happy. Well, calling it yet another might not be the best way to describe, because for the first time in this podcast, we are joined by an Australian cricketer. Before introducing him, let me just tell you how we reached here. So on the Facebook page Random Cricket Photos That Make Me Happy, the page that I run, I made a post on Stuart MacGill, which of course I also put out on Twitter a month ago. And to my surprise, this cricketer with more than 200 test wickets and more than 40 tests, he was kind enough to reply to that post. And well, the subsequent conversations with the man resulted in him being here on my podcast, where he, like my other guest, sits down with me to recall some of his favorite pictures from the game. A very warm welcome, Stuart. A very, very warm welcome. Thank you for being so kind to agree to this exercise.
We were taught when we were young kids, always be very careful of people that are too nice to you. But I've learned as I've been getting older that, you know what, a lot of people just want to have a chat because we share something in common and we love something in common. And I think you and I love cricket. And, I sense that, during our interactions on Twitter, you're a cool guy. And it's my pleasure to actually be on your podcast, man. And I congratulate you on helping to make people's lives a little bit easier during a difficult time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So before we start with the photographs, what we are going to do in this episode is that we'll keep a question followed by a photograph. Okay. Let me start from the post, which was about, your decision to not go to Zimbabwe in 2004 at the age of 35 because you felt strongly against Robert Mugabe regime. So just walk us through that decision a bit. Tell us how things panned out, and also about your good friend Andy Flower, because he suggested some things to you. So yeah, tell us about what happened back then.
Yeah, look, you make a very good point, because it did have, my decision did have quite a bit to do with Andy Flower, because I had been, some people think that I'd never been to Zimbabwe, but the only way, because, as you know, Australia's a long way from the rest of the world, where, Australia and New Zealand, we're well down in the southern hemisphere. And so sometimes we can feel a little bit removed from the rest of the planet. But when you have the opportunity to visit a country that you've only been gifted through your sport, which is cricket. I went to Zimbabwe after a Sri Lankan tour, and I met a couple of really, really nice guys. We had a great time. We met some really good people, and it was only then that I started to pay attention. After I'd arrived at home, it was only then that I'd started to pay attention to what was going on in Zimbabwe. And so I was just sort of thinking, well, these guys seem to be having a hard time, and they're my friends, and I don't really like that too much. And so I started reading about why they were having a hard time. And it turns out that there was a lot of money being siphoned out of cricket and into one man's pocket. I think he called himself the patron of the ZCU, the Zimbabwean Cricket Union, and most of the money that was being generated by the ICC and by tours from international nations was going into his pocket. And that was the bit, I think, that made me feel sad. But I didn't know enough about the politics in Zimbabwe to feel comfortable making decision myself. So I spoke to a couple of friends around the world, and in particular, Andy Flower is a good guy, man. He just tells the truth. If he's made a mistake, he'll tell the truth. He's as straight as a die. And so I called him up, and he said to me, he said, "Listen, Stu, if you think that by not touring Zimbabwe, you'll change the world or change Zimbabwean cricket, then you're kidding yourself and don't support you." Yeah, that's what he said. But he said, but if you just think personally that this doesn't make sense to you and it is upsetting to you, then that makes me feel really quite good. And thank you very much for supporting us. It wasn't about, he just sort of said, look, anybody who stands on a soapbox and, tries to make a stand, they will probably be forgotten tomorrow. I wasn't trying to be a politician. That's not my role. I was just a sportsman that felt uncomfortable, and I was thinking about my friends and I was thinking about my sport, and I am very glad that I did what I did, and I wasn't trying to influence anybody else. And so I was very comfortable with the way that everybody else in my, team and all of my mates behaved, because it was all up to them.
That's extremely brave and beautiful, I would say. I think I wrote much of what I thought about it in that post. And yeah, I can just say that one needs to have a really big heart and a very clear mind to take that decision, which could have possibly proved career ending, because you were 35 at that age and at that stage. And, Shane Warne was making a comeback to the team. But, I think I really have a great amount of admiration for that decision of yours. Anyway, moving on to, now that we have begun the conversation, we'll now steer it towards the part which I believe my audience must be really waiting for. So, Stuart, tell us about the first photograph that is, one of your favorites, the one that you want to start the list with.
Oh, yes. Okay, so, look, for those of you that aren't sure, look, the photos that you get to have a look at tonight, most of them are of me when I was a much younger man. So forgive me for providing photos that make me look, and let's face it, incredibly hot. But the reason that this photo in particular makes a lot of, it means a lot to me, is because I grew up in Western Australia, which is a 5-hour plane ride from Perth to Sydney. My father and my grandfather played for Western Australia, but I had been selected for a test match in Sydney. And this photograph shows me on the top of, I think it's the Key West Apartments in Sydney, with the Sydney Harbour Bridge behind me. And I had a great test match. And I think that the reason that I love it so much is because...
You look incredibly hot.
Well, apart from the fact that I look incredibly hot, and stop it, admit, you hang up. The reason for me that it's so important is because I feel it as though I was made very, very, very welcome once I'd moved to New South Wales. I was 25, so I'd played one game and one first-class game only for Western Australia. I moved to New South Wales, Sydney, when I was 25, and that's when my cricket journey really took off. I played my first game for New South Wales when I was 26. I played my first game for Australia when I was 28, and I think I was 20. I was still 28, but almost 29 when I played my first test match at the SCG. And the reason I love this photo, man, is because it shows me in Sydney And when you move to New South Wales, to Sydney, from anywhere else in Australia, there are certain things that capture your imagination. For me, it's not Bondi Beach because the beaches are better in Perth. But the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House and the SCG, they're iconic venues and iconic monuments to sport and culture in Australia. And bearing in mind that there's 40,000 years of culture in Australia. But while I was growing up, I hadn't been exposed to anything older than 250 years. And so now I know a lot more, and so I'm a lot more grateful for all of the native people's contributions to my experience. But at the time, I just thought, oh my God, that's the Sydney Harbour Bridge. This is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. And I had my picture taken in front of it, and I was very, very happy. And look, it was a big moment for me. So I loved that, and I love that photo.
On top of the world, right? Must be some feeling to have gotten a chance to represent the country at the highest level. Something so many aspire to be, 200 test wickets. That's you didn't talk about it. I don't know if you're being modest about it, but you have quite a love affair with the Sydney cricket ground, which coincidentally is also your, SCG are the initials of Stuart MacGill. So tell us about that love affair with Sydney. What did that ground get out of you that you performed so well over there all the time?
So look, when I was born, my grandfather's names on both my mother and my father's side. My father's side was Charles, and my grandfather's side on my mother's side was Glyndŵr, which is a Welsh name. So that's Stuart, and then Charles Glyndŵr, and so SCG MacGill. But I was born in Perth, so it wasn't, important necessarily. But then, and in about 1983, so I would have been about 13 years old, I'd say, 12, 13 years old. My dad was coaching the Western Australian state under-15 hockey team, and we came to Sydney, and I went on a tour of the SCG, and it was the first time I'd ever been there, and that was the first time I ever realised that my initials were SCG. And so, I don't know, it sounds stupid for a 13-year-old, but I bought a tie. And in those days, so in '83, they were big, fat ties. They weren't the thin ties. They weren't they were very big, wide ties. And I still have it. It's it's something that I'll keep forever. But it was because, when you're a kid, you don't have much money and you don't buy too many things. But that was my souvenir from that tour, and I bought it. And then years later, in 1996, I played my first game for New South Wales at the SCG. And from the old scoreboard, all of the names on the old scoreboard were written on linen, and they were stretched out across the scoreboard. And in my first game, if you go to the SCG and if you go to the members stand and into the members the home dressing rooms, you'll see some of these. See Bradman, you'll see Davison, you'll see some of these names stretched out that used to be on the old scoreboard at the SCG. My first game for New South Wales at the SCG, I had actually 7 of the guys in my team. I'd had their autograph. I'd asked for their autograph in games when I was growing up. So it was a pretty cool game for me. But the room attendant came up to me halfway through the match, so about day 2 or day 3, and he said to me, "Look, have you ever played here before?" And I said, yeah, I played here maybe in 92 or 93. And he said, no, way before then. Have you, And I said, no. He said, how old are you? And I said, oh, look, I'm 25. He said, did you have a dad or a grandfather or, who played at the SCG? And I said, oh, my dad played here 2 or 3 times, I think. And he said, we have his name, the linen stretch, we have his name. We're going to throw them all in the bin. Would you like it? And I went, yes, I want it. And so the history associated with the SCG, my family, look, my grandfather played, I think only 4 to 6 games for Western Australia, either side of the Second World War. My father played maybe a dozen games for Western Australia, 68 to 72. I played 1 game for Western Australia in, let's say, 93-ish. But my family was a cricket family. And when I was growing up, it meant a lot to me. All of the people who had contributed to the magnitude of the game meant a lot to me. And so the fact that my dad had a piece of linen with his name on it that had been stretched across the scoreboard at the SCG.
Must have made you feel so proud.
And I got it. Oh, my goodness, mate. You got no idea. And on my first game for New South Wales, my grandfather, he couldn't really talk much at the time because he was old, but he was there. And my dad and we had a photo taken, and it was nice for us all to be there. And look, the SCG means a lot to me because this was the place that made me feel welcome outside my home, and this is the place that made me the person that I am now.
And that's how you ended up owning the SCG with so many wickets. Well, that's quite a motivation. That's quite a beautiful story.
Except for when Sachin bashed the living daylights out of me, I think 278. But yeah, that's all right. Anybody who was there knows that he was out when he was about 0. But anyway.
Okay, next photograph is one of Dennis Lilly. So tell me, why is this photograph special to you?
Okay, so my dad and Dennis, so as I mentioned, my dad played Sheffield Shield cricket in Western Australia from about 68 to 72, but didn't play much, maybe a dozen games. He was a leg spin bowler, didn't turn the ball much, batted in middle order, but Dennis was playing roughly the same time. My dad and Dennis became good friends, played at the same club for a while. When I was a little boy, and I'm talking from birth, but I remember from, let's say, age 3 to age 5, we used to go to his house. And in those days in Australia, when you would go to somebody's house for dinner, like the parents would go there for dinner, the kids would come with. There wouldn't be babysitters. They'd come with. They'd say hello to everybody. They'd, be polite and ha. And then they'd go and sleep upstairs or sleep on the floor or sleep under the table or whatever, something like that. I remember Dennis, he played this, I know this is very, very nerdy. There was a song, it was by Neil Diamond. It was called Song Sung Blue. And I don't know why I liked it, but I must have been about 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And every single time we went to Dennis's house, he would put it on for me, and just for me. Put it on for me when I'd go to So when we walked into the house, that song would be playing. And I remember very, very clearly being in the car on the way to his house and thinking to myself, oh my, I wonder if the song's going to be on. And it always was. And he would be incredibly nice to me, as would all of the people there. And I can't remember many other people there because he was Dennis Lilly, so I was just focused on him. But then I would go upstairs and I'd go to sleep, and my sister and I would we'd sleep until it was time for us to go home. But when I left his place, he would always give me a present. And it might have been a photo, an autographed photo. It might have been a pair of gloves. Sometimes he gave me a cricket bat. He signed my cricket bat. He always made me feel very, very special as a very, very, very young boy. And then as I got a little bit older, I'm talking, let's say 9, 10, 9, 10 to, let's say, 13 years old, and I went to the Wacker to watch a test match or a Shield game, at the front of the changing rooms, there's always a lot of young kids going, like me, but going, can I have an autograph? Can I have an autograph? Dennis would always see me, and he'd point at me, and he'd say, Stu, hey, and he'd wave at me. And he'd call me up at the Wacker. And in those days, the Wacker had a little balcony, actually much the same as at the SCG. He'd call me up and he'd go, come up here. And he'd call me into the changing rooms, and he would make every single person sign, my autograph book or my cricket bat or whatever I had. And then, of course, you can imagine I'd walk down the stairs back out into reality, and all the kids just thought, who is this guy? He's the coolest guy in the world. And look, the reason I played cricket, as I said, my family is a cricket family. My grandfather and my dad played for Western Australia. But all I wanted to do was be Dennis Lilly. And it was incredibly disappointing to me when I realised that I couldn't bowl fast. But
I was tempted to ask that. I was tempted to ask that. Were you inspired to take up fast bowling at some stage from him? What happened there? How did you turn a leg spinner if you grew up admiring DK?
So my dad, my grandfather opened the batting and bowling for Western Australia. Okay. He dismissed Bradman. My father was a wrist spin bowler. But I wanted to be Dennis Lilly, and I watched the West Indians bowling in the 80s. I wanted to be scary and, cool. But I worked out that I just couldn't. But I think I bowled a little bit of both until I was about 12 or 13 years old. And then I know this sounds weird, but then I couldn't bowl. I'd been trying to bowl a googly. Completely lost my leg spinner.
Okay.
Worked out, because I thought when I lost my leg spinner that, no problem, I can bowl fast. Then worked out, I can't bowl fast. And I just thought, oh my goodness, this is going to go terribly wrong. But then fortunately managed to teach myself how to bowl a good leg spinner again, and things started to go right. But I always wanted to be Dennis Lilly. I wanted to be Michael Holding. I wanted to be Malcolm Marshall. I wanted to be all of these guys. Because for me, they were the cool ones. So they'd bowl the ball that was unplayable, and they didn't carry on. They just look at the batsman, and they didn't really say anything. They just looked at him and kind of going, yeah, And I wanted to be that guy. I realised when I was, maybe 15 that I couldn't do that. And then I got really disturbed when I couldn't bowl a leg spinner.
Mm-hmm.
But then I managed to teach myself how to bowl it again.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, the way that I taught myself how to bowl it again was better than I'd learned it the first time. And so the reason I ended up turning the ball a long way
Mm-hmm.
and getting so much on the ball was because of the way that I'd managed to teach myself how to do it again. A lot of it was done without releasing the ball. It was like looking in the mirror, trying to see which way. Because I worked out that your wrist had to be in a particular position when you released the ball for it to do certain things. Because, people always say, oh, come on, man, it's not rocket science. Well, the funny thing about cricket is it's rocket science.
Not everyone can bowl leg spin. It is rocket science, actually.
No, it's better. But the reason it's rocket science is because it's just physics. And that's why I say it's just rocket science. Because it's all about angles. It's all about momentum. It's all about revolutions.
Yeah.
And I didn't know at the time, but I was teaching myself to do things the right way. And but I still look to finish on the Dennis Lillee thing. I got to 100 Test wickets. Maybe I can't remember exactly the number of tests, but maybe let's say 21 tests. And I think Dennis had got to 100 tests. I was in the Caribbean, and I think Dennis had got to 100 test wickets in 23 tests.
Wow.
And so I phoned my dad and I said, I phoned my dad and I said, look, why don't you call Dennis and say to him, how quickly did you get to 100 test wickets? And Dennis left a message on my the voicemail in my hotel room in the Caribbean, and it was, "Hey Stu, how are you going?" Because it's Uncle Dennis, Uncle Dennis and Auntie Helen. It's great, and because I grew up with them. How quick did you get to 300 test wickets? I have to admit, I almost wet my pants. It was one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my life. But he was exactly right, because I was trying to be a smart ass and he totally shut me down.
Well, not too many won against Dennis Lillee, so yeah, you don't have anything to feel bad about.
It was cool though. No, that's one of the best moments of it's one of the best moments of my cricket career.
Yeah, I think he pretty much symbolized the kind of cricket Australia began to play, from the time of Ian Chappell. And honestly, one of those characters who would bring people to the stadiums. So not at all surprised to know that, those growing up in the 70s, 80s would of course be in awe of that man. And remember, not a lot of people know this, but Dennis Lillee is also responsible for making one of the greatest contributions to Indian cricket when he told the young Sachin Tendulkar at the MRF Pace Academy to give up his aspirations to become a fast bowler and instead focus on batting. So that's a very, very important contribution that he has made to Indian cricket as well. So we have a lot to thank him for. Moving on to the next picture, again a special one because it has you with your dad. This is from Bridgetown Test. Now tell me the story behind this one.
Okay, so a lot of people ask me what... Look, I was very, very fortunate. I got 12 wickets in a test match at the SCG. It was my first ever test match at the SCG. It was against England in an Ashes test in maybe 99. And because, as I said to you before, with the picture with me with the Harbour Bridge behind me, Sydney means a lot to me because I felt welcome for the first time in my cricket career. I'd had a great summer. Then I'd been to the West Indies and things got difficult. And so this is actually from my second series in the West Indies. And what happened on this series was, because the first series I went to the West Indies, the Caribbean, Shane and I were both playing together. It was immediately following the SCG Test match. Shane was just coming out of an injury, and I think that people forget how significant his injuries were, and I think actually Shane forgets how significant his injuries were. Most people would never be able to recover from the position that he had found himself in, but he did, and he continued onwards to greatness. This series in the Caribbean was a very, very difficult series. McGrath had gone home for a little bit. Andy Bickle, Jason Gillespie, and myself had been doing a lot of work. In Barbados, it's funny, for a right arm wrist spin bowler, if you're to say what is the greatest place, what is the greatest set of environmental requirements that you can have in order to bowl well? For a right arm wrist spin bowler, the breeze needs to come from third man. So I'm at the top of my mark. The breeze comes from third man to the right-handed batsman. So it's blowing in my face. It's blowing in the left-hand side of my face. And what happens there is when you spin the ball hard, the ball curls into the right-handed batsman and it bounces away. Now, in the West Indies at the time, people always think that because the West Indians have this amazing fast bowling crew, and not just one crew, they've had a bunch. People think that the pitches are fast. They're not fast. There's not a lot of bounce in them. They don't carry very well. But if you bowl spin, the top of the pitch, so if you imagine a pitch, and when I'm talking about the pitch, I'm talking about from top to maybe 6 inches down vertically. The top of the pitch has a crust on it and it bounces. But if you bang the ball into the top of it, then it dies. So fast bowlers can't necessarily bowl good bounces, but spin bowlers who don't hit the top of the pitch very hard get a lot of bounce and a lot of turn. And Barbados is the greatest place in the West Indies to bowl wrist spin because the breeze is from third man. It blows on the left-hand side of your face. You can curl it in. It explodes off the pitch because it's a clay-based pitch. It's not slow, and you can do some really, really good things. Australia, I think, had batted first. We'd made a few runs. We'd done okay.
Which few when it comes to Australia of that time meant 600 runs.
Well, yeah, but the problem with that was, mate, is that we didn't get the West Indians out. We managed to force the follow on, but and it's very pertinent because of Lakshman and Dravid. Australia was very, very scared of enforcing the follow on.
That was the effect of that Eden Gardens test.
Yes, man. No, but this is a true story. So
right.
Steve Waugh brought us all in. So I remember maybe it's Bickle, me, Dizzy. I don't think McGrath was there. I can't remember who the other guy was. I know it's a terrible, and I'm ashamed that I don't remember, but it's a long time ago and I'm old. So I apologise. But he bought, there would have been 4 or 5 of us bowlers in the group. And he said to us, look, we have the opportunity to enforce the follow-on. And he was very, I'm not going to say he was nervous, actually. I retract. It wasn't that he was nervous, but he was aware of the fact that there'd been a problem, with Lakshman and Dravid. And so because Australia ever since then has been very reluctant to enforce the follow-on. He said to us, listen, because it was really, really hot and the pitch was really, really flat and we were pretty exhausted. And he said to us, listen, so Steve Waugh said to us, look, we can enforce the follow-on here. The pitch is really, really flat. It's very, very hot. I understand that you guys have all bowled a lot. I'm going to leave it up to you because I believe that you are the only team on the planet that can win this match. In the end, we all decided, because lots of bowlers, we love enforcing the follow-on because it's about crushing. So we wanted to, you want to beat the opposition and you want to beat them badly. And I remember saying, no, follow on. We're making, it's the follow on. And all the other guys went, you know what, Blair, yeah, let's do it. I think we may have been in the field, as it turned out, so we batted for a day and a half. I'd say we were in the field for, so that's 2, that's 4. Yeah, I'd say we're in the field for 2.5. Okay? It was horrible. It was nasty. It was bad. But I got 5 wickets in the first innings. I got 4 wickets in the second innings. And then that picture with my father and I was after, I was going to say I got man of the match. I don't know if that's true. But
You did. You were the man of the match.
Did. Right. So I think I got 9 wickets. It was, I think that match is the best match I ever played. I think that Steve Waugh told us that we were the only bowling team in the world that could win the match from the point that we were in. And we did what he asked us to do. And that's my best match ever.
You bowled 76 overs there.
76?
Yes, you did.
What a muppet. What are you doing letting somebody... Oh, my God. Oh,
How does
God.
the prospect of bowling 76 overs now feel like, Stuart?
If I bowled 4 overs for the SCG 11 or something like that, I can't walk for a week. So 76 overs in 4 days? Oh, my goodness. But listen, let me say, so my dad, as I said, he played for Western Australia. My grandfather played for Western Australia. My grandfather's brother was the state selector for 25 years in Western Australia. It means a lot to me to have had that picture because I'm pretty sure my dad was happy.
It is indeed a moment of pride because, well, as a leg spinner, to see your son play for the country and not just play, but play so well to win a man of the match. And after bowling 76 overs, I'm pretty sure he must have felt extremely proud. But tell me one thing.
I'm actually going to have to write that down because I didn't realize that it was 76 overs. That's, 76 overs. If because I don't know if you coach young kids yourself, but they get to bowl 2 overs each per match through the season.
Okay.
When you're coaching kids who are 10, 12 years old. And I bowled 76 overs in 2.5 days.
Tell me how sore you were after that. I'm pretty sure that must have taken a toll on the body.
Oh my The worst one is when I was at the Cricket Academy in 1991. I played against the ACT, so the Australian Capital Territory. So
Yeah.
Australian Institute of Sport playing Australian Capital Territory, and I bowled 75 overs in a row, over 2 innings, but we made them follow on. So about 75 in a row, and 85 in total over the 4 days. Probably 3 days because we batted as well. Actually, may have even been 2 days. But I remember being in the shower, and it was one of those power showers, and they'd have the power jet, and I was putting it on the part of my body that was hurting, and I was crying. So, how did it feel to bowl 76 overs in 2 days? It didn't feel good. Look, it's funny that you think it clicked. In my opinion, it didn't click.
Okay.
I think Brian Lara is the greatest player. Certainly, I think it's difficult to compare generations, particularly pre 1970 to now. Brian Lara, well, look, for instance, the last couple of days, Australia makes 389 for 4, India 338 for 9. In 2000, I played against Pakistan at the SCG in maybe my first ODI, and we made 334. At the time, that was the world record. So things change. Times change. It's look. It's difficult to. We're comparing apples with oranges. I think that this West Indian team that I played, I got 60 wickets, but that's because I played more tests against the West Indians than I did against anybody else. The greatest, as I said, I refuse to consider any player that I played against during my time. I am not saying that, Neil Harvey or, Ian Chappell, Greg Chappell, I'm not saying that they weren't good against spin bowling. When I was bowling to Sachin and Rahul, I felt that getting them out was an insurmountable task. But when I was bowling to Brian, I felt that he was going to destroy me. Look, have a look at what he did to Murali. Have a look at what he did to Warney. He destroyed spin bowlers perennially. He was amazing. Look, I did actually have trouble as time went by with Chandapal. And by the way, I thought he was a lovely bloke too. So that also makes things more difficult. Then Brian and I get along great now too. And because I deliberately tried to stay away from him when I was playing against him, because I felt that my advantage was him being unsure about me. So it wasn't about sledging. It was about me just not giving him anything. But now that we don't play against each other anymore, I'll give him anything he wants, because the respect that I have for the guy is, immense. But Chanapal was the first guy to come up to me when I realised that physically I was unable to play anymore. He was the first guy that came up to me. He said, "Man, you're cool. he gave me a hug. He was, so I get a lot of time for him too. So the wickets that I got against the West Indian team mean a lot to me, but I played more against them than I played against anybody else. So we need to keep that in mind. Um, yeah, I think the problem with the West Indian teams or the teams from the Caribbean at that time were that they were all trying to establish themselves as individuals. Whereas the Steve Waugh teams that I played with, he recognized the individuals and he embraced the individuals, but then he promoted the fact that we were all chasing the same goal. And that's why we did better than anybody else. Look, those West Indian teams, I feel, and I don't want to be disrespectful to Brian here, but that poor bloke, you think of everything that he achieved, and he was let down by his team on many occasions because he had set matches up often and it didn't work out. And I, I look, I don't wish they'd have won against us, but I wish that they'd won a little bit more often for him.
Definitely, that's true for West Indies cricket of that time. There was so much that they could have achieved, and there was so much that Brian Lara did for the team. But somehow it all the pieces of the puzzle never fell in place for them. Moving on to the next picture, Stuart. Tell me which one is it?
It's funny that I've chosen to provide you with the Brian Lara picture because the night before this picture was taken, so my wife Maria and I, we have a restaurant. We have a Greek restaurant in Neutral Bay in Sydney. It's a lovely little place, very small. But Yuvraj and Sachin came into the restaurant one night, and they spent an evening with us and had a lovely meal. Because of course it's lovely, because I was the waiter, and so they've got the hottest waiter in Australia. But but so they came into the restaurant, and then the next day there was a match on at the SCG. I don't remember what it was. It might have been to be raising money for the fires or something like this. And I didn't know that Brian was going to be there. I was on the SCG Trust at the time. I went to the ground, and Brian was there. And so I'd spent time with Sachin the night before, and Yuvraj, a good friend of mine, Kamil Khan, a great guy from Pakistan, he's a great guy. So we had a good crew at the restaurant the night before. And then the night after, I go to the SCG, and there's Brian. And I'm kind of going, oh, this is ridiculous. I got the best two batsmen of all time in 2 days hanging out with me. And as a bowler, obviously, you don't like batsmen too much. But Brian, because I've been honest with him since, I had a lot of trouble with him when I was playing against him because he was intimidating and he was dominating and he defeated me. Even though I knocked him over a couple of times, it was very, very intimidating. And the reason I posted this picture to you is because Brian was living in a time. So, look, I know in India there's a bunch of states and everybody is slightly different. In the UK, there's a lot of different groups. If you're a test ground, you have a little bit more weight than if you're not test ground. in Australia, New South Wales, you seem to get picked, but if you're from anywhere else, you don't. I think the thing with Brian is that he has always been very open and honest about what he's been trying to do. Cricket is a very unusual sport. If you look after yourself, which isn't being selfish, I might add, if you look after yourself and you look after your own game, then you are doing the best for your team. And Brian Lara has always done that. And he is, for me, and I like sometimes I hesitate because I try and show a little bit of respect for the old guys who I do respect. I think he's the greatest player of spin bowling of all time. He was just devastating. I never wanted to bowl to him. I thought that I could a couple of times. One time in Adelaide, I was bowling like $1 million, and he just absolutely tore me to pieces. And I was in shock, and I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it. And so the reason I wanted the picture taken with Brian Lara is because I wanted my son and my daughter and my friends to know that if somebody in your life gets the better of you, you should always remain respectful and be grateful that you've had the opportunity to compete with them. And I am incredibly grateful that I've had the opportunity to compete with Brian. And I'm the first person to say that, he took advantage of me on several occasions. He is a very, very special player. He's great with kids in terms of autographs and all that sort of stuff. Ironically, I mentioned the fact that Sachin came into the restaurant, and then the next night I saw Brian 3 years earlier. I saw Sachin in a restaurant, and then Brian the day after. And my son had just made his high. He's a bowler, left arm swing bowler. He's great, and I love him. And but he doesn't bat as badly as I do. But he
You still hit a
Sachin
couple of
said,
sixes at the SCG, if I remember correctly.
"Oh my goodness!" But Sachin said to my son, he signed his bat and he said, "Oh, all the best, Sachin Tendulkar." And then the next day I saw Brian, and Brian, I said to Brian, "Oh well, my son has just scored his highest score after Sachin signed his bat," and he said, "Well, he may have scored his highest score, but I'm about to sign his bat, and this is it." And the next day, he did score a higher score. So Brian, Brian Lara is my number one. But Sachin and Lakshman and Sehwag and Ganguly and, oh my goodness, Rahul, they're all up there. Hey, and I'll tell you who else has bashed me in my time. Sangakkara. And
The
how,
left-hander.
how dare you be nice to me? Yeah, because we're friends as well. So that's the worst bit, is when you're friends with someone and they just take advantage of you. It's terrible.
Definitely not, not the best feeling to be. Yeah. So, but was that in Sri Lanka when you toured Sri Lanka, or was that in Australia?
No, he mashed me in Australia. But throughout. So I think Sangakkara, he and his family toured Australia twice. I think I'm pretty sure, and we've spent time together on each time. We would go for dinner and stuff because he's a nice guy, man, and he's taking me out for dinner in Sri Lanka too, because listen, the thing is with our age group, and I'm older than all of these guys, but we we've been through some interesting times, and we realised that cricket is a challenging sport, but that's what makes you a better person. And and if you respect the bad days, then your good days will be better. And so Kumar Sangakkara and Dravid and Lakshman and Ganguly and Lara and all these guys, they've done some good things for me. And I have to also say, I know I'm talking to India right now, but my Pakistani friends have understood the difference between me and them too. I think maybe Indians and Australians have too much in common.
Mm-hmm.
We share a lot.
Okay, that's beautiful.
It's funny though, man. We share a lot. The Pakistanis and Bangladeshis and Australians, we're different, And so it's like, okay, are you sure you're nice to me? And that's cool. I kind of like that too. But yeah, it's good. But cricket is a very, very interesting game, and I defy anybody on the planet to find another sport that challenges people in the same way. Yeah, I defy anybody on the planet to find anybody that challenges people in the same way.
Lovely. The final photograph has you with Yuvraj Singh and Sachin Tendulkar. So tell us about that.
So look, UV and Sachin came in with my good friend Camille Khan. They came into the restaurant, which is in Neutral Bay in Sydney, New South Wales. My wife is Greek, Maria, the lovely Maria. Obviously, it's very difficult for people like Sachin and and UV to come into a restaurant because people stare and they make a big deal. And they've been to so many lovely restaurants in the world and so many flash restaurants in the world. You've all seen me. Anywhere that I work is not flash. But the one thing I can promise you is that it's seeking perfection. It might not be flash. I'm going to be wearing a black t-shirt. Maybe I'm going to be wearing a cap. But I will only buy the best food. I will only employ the best staff. I might be relaxed. But when people come in, I can guarantee that they'll have a good time because the food and wine and company and staff, we're all going to be nice to you. And when Sachin and Yuvi came in, it was a wonderful night. And I think the reason that I sent you this photo as the last photo is because I wanted you to know that people from different backgrounds can have common goals. And that was what the greatest teams that I played with under Steve Waugh realised. So Steve Waugh's teams were all about different people, different backgrounds, different approaches, but similar goal. We would all work in the same direction. Can you imagine? Call Sachin up and say, Sachin, come into the restaurant. And it's a very small restaurant. It's only 26 people at the moment during COVID. It's like, yeah, Sachin, come into the restaurant. That's not fair. It's not fair. But you know what happened? He did come in, and He was lovely to Maria. He was lovely to my staff. He was lovely to me. And UV is as hot as they come. So I gave him lots of hugs. So, yeah, it was a great night. And that's why I set you that as the last photo, because I just wanted to show you that even though we're in Australia and we're a little bit different and we might be a little bit removed from the rest of the world, we still appreciate everything that cricket provides us, and we still respect everybody that is involved in our great game.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. And well, you're keeping up with the tradition of bringing the best. You had the best batsman in your restaurant, so that's great.
Hey, and hey, listen, you know what? And now I've had the best podcast.
That's so sweet of you. That's so sweet of you, Stuart. You have brought out some beautiful memories, and yeah, it's late in the day, I understand, and yet you are here talking your heart out, and that makes me feel really special. Thank you so much for this, Stuart.
Look, you know what? Anytime, hopefully one day the borders will be open again, and you can come to Australia, and or you can come to our restaurant.
Oh, surely
And,
that would be lovely. And we'll
mwah,
talk more
I
cricket
love
then.
you all.